So, the English Civil War. Where to start? Well, let's start with the big questions. When did it start? Well, it started in 1642. Who's fighting in it? Well, on one side you've got the Royalists, led by King Charles I, and on the other side you've got your rebels, or your parliamentarians, led by a man named Thomas Fairfax. Now, Oliver Cromwell does come into it, but he turns up a little bit later on. At the beginning, it's old Tom. Now, why are they fighting? Well, this gets a bit complicated. You see, there are many, many reasons why they're fighting, but because we've only got so much time, I like to boil it down to three: power, money, and religion. Unfortunately, the usual suspects when it comes to any war. Now, power. Well, when we talk about power, what we are talking about in particular is the divine right of kings. This is the belief that a king is appointed by God himself to rule a given country. Now, King Charles I believes in this, and Parliament aren't too fond of the fact, because it means that every decision King Charles makes is ordained by God, and well, God can't be wrong. Parliament being voted in by each other, not by the people, it's important to say, well, they feel like they should have a greater say in how the country is run. And so we get a conflict of interest very early on. Next problem, money. See, when you're appointed by God, you tend to be a bit frivolous, and King Charles I was no different. He would often spend the country's cash on whatever he liked. For instance, he would ask for a navy. Parliament would collect the taxes for the navy, they'll hand the money to the king, and the king would not spend it on a single boat. He would spend it on new shoes, new horses, paying off debts to old friends. So as you can imagine, this relationship became quite strenuous quite quickly. And last but not least, religion. Now, England was a Protestant country at the time, and this was a bit of a problem for King Charles I, because Protestants and Catholics weren't exactly good friends, and King Charles I was married to Henrietta Maria of France, a Catholic. Now, he was quite enamored with the Catholic faith. He quite enjoyed the way they celebrated. And he wanted to change the Protestant faith in small ways to try and reflect that. However, people didn't see it as an addition. They saw it as a conversion. And there's a great deal of civil unrest burning away in the country. And we end up with these three reasons snowballing out of control. And here we are with the English Civil War. Now, before we get any further, I need to talk to you a little bit about Alexander Popham. Now, Alexander Popham is this chap up in here. Now, a lot of people are going to look at that painting and they will shout, he's a royalist. But unfortunately, he is not. He's a parliamentarian. And this is a lot to do with the fact that we get this idea in our heads that you have royalists made up of cavaliers, young, dashing men fighting for the king, looking all fabulous with their beautiful hair and horses. And then you have the parliamentarians. And these men are all drab, boring looking, and they wear armour a bit like that up there. And, well, it's simply not the truth. It is an English civil war. You've got rich versus rich, poor versus poor. It's not a war on fashion, it's a war of ideologies. The only difference you'll find is the colour sash they wear. If they wear a red sash, they are a royalist. If they wear an easily distinguishable orange sash, they are a parliamentarian. And those are the two main colours you're going to find on the battlefield. Now, Alexander Popham is very important to us here at the Royal Armouries, because not only does he fight in the war, but he supplies his men with arms and armour. And this arms and armour was looked after by him for many years after the war. And it's thanks to him looking after this stuff at Littlecote House in Wiltshire that we have the largest collection of English Civil War arms and armour in the entire world.